5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. That would be one integrated. I know. Just let you know. Means that you at least know a couple things about agriculture. Okay, give about 2 more minutes. Just make it real quick. Well, just a couple of you finishing up. Who'd like some note sheet for today? Just keep your hand up. These aren't fancy note sheets, but should be enough to get into that format for notes today. Anybody else want note sheets? Okay. Yeah, so if you didn't get a paper note sheet, I should see you taking digital notes. Because this is going to go towards your Unit 5 field journal. Don't want to get off on a rocky start. What? Yeah, but it'll be ready for you guys next week. Okay, so if you can go ahead and transition over to the Nearpod. Even if you just have a couple questions left, you can either just randomly guess or just submit the quiz as is. Because we got stuff to go over and figure out and learn about today. As I said, this is the last time I ask you guys want I don't think I see you until Tuesday for a whole other week. So we're going to kind of crash course some of the information today. So I just wanted to go over with you guys just the objective for today and kind of what Unit 5 is all about. So Unit 5 are 5.1, so there are 12 sections in this unit. So it's our last big unit. The next 2 units after this deal with urbanization and economics, globalization, and so forth. But this is our last big unit. So we're focusing primarily on agricultural processes and patterns. There's a lot of things that go along with this. So what we're going to be looking at today is just kind of the base foundation of what agriculture is. What does agriculture look like? And so that's what we're going to primarily look at for today. I do have a cool video at the end that I found in relation to Unit 3 about language differences between the UK and the US. It's a cool BuzzFeed video. I saw my feed yesterday. So we'll hopefully get to that towards the end of class. So we'll get over to the Nearpod. So welcome to Agriculture 5.1. It ain't much, but it's honest work, as they say. A lot of memes to start us off today. Don't mind me, just farming memes here. And then we got Von Thonen. He's my homeboy. You guys are going to learn about the Von Thonen model later on this unit. Of course, you guys know I grew up in one of the agricultural centers of this country, and even argued the world, being in Iowa. And so this is kind of funny meme here. It is kind of true. This is pretty much what Iowa is, aside from a couple big cities. One of them I grew up in, but all around it, cornfield, or soybean field, primarily cornfield. Okay, so let's get us started off. What is agriculture? So it's okay if you don't honestly don't know, but hopefully you can identify a couple things associated with agriculture. So maybe provide some examples. Okay. So probably the easiest or most common way of referring to agriculture is farming. It is culture that has, keep in mind, I know, even though you don't see the student names up there, I can see them from my end. So agriculture, yes, we know it's agri with culture part of it. So how they farm based on location. Agriculture is the study of the land and what's on the land. Okay. So how to utilize the land for our benefit. Farming, ranching, livestock, a lot of great things. I noticed overall our pre-assessment scores, just the raw data, generally higher than some of the ones we've had in the past. I think that, knowing Utah is more of an agricultural-based state, I think that overall we have a little bit more information or insight as to what agriculture is. So some great responses so far. So these are our 5 things you're going to want to jot down somewhere. We'll go into each one in detail. So to understand agriculture, we have to start understanding some basic economic structure. This is going to help us and lead us into Unit 7 eventually. But there are 5 sectors of the economy that we look at in the world. We have primary, which is pretty much agriculture, gathering, extracting. So a lot, most if not all, most if not all developing economies, developing countries are primary. So that's where you're going to have a country where it's based primarily on resources. That their economy is solely based on resources. There's not a lot of professional professions in countries. Then you have secondary. So these are going to be countries that are economies that are heavy in manufacturing, processing, construction, power production. So if we're thinking about the model of, I'm blanking on it, the industrial model, where we're looking at the stages of development, 5 stages of development. Where do you think primary is going to be? It's going to be stage 1. Who do you think stage 1? Who do you think stage 2? Okay, who do you think stage 3? Anybody think 4 or 5? So a primary is going to be more stage 2, where they're starting to get the hang of it. There's like a primary economy is going to be towards the beginning of stage 2. So right now, a lot of primary economies are found in sub-Saharan Africa, in South America, and parts of Southeast Asia. Secondary economies are going to be those who are either at the very end stage of stage 2 to the beginning of stage 3. Those are going to be countries where they have a lot of manufacturing jobs. You have a lot of their economy based on construction, processing, and so forth. So some countries like that would be like Mexico, is in that secondary right now. China is in the weird area. It's kind of secondary, but transitioning to tertiary, which is the next one, which is retail, wholesale, trade, personal and professional services. This is where your economy starts expanding and having more things in it, not just based off of those primary, secondary forces. Then you get quaternary, which is information research management. Then quinary, executive decision makers. So out of these categories, what do you think the United States is? 7. Or also, who are your things were primary or secondary? Who are your things were tertiary, tertiary? Who are your things were quaternary? And then who are your things were canary or canary? So we're that last one. Reason being is that think about executive decision makers. We're most of the world's largest companies. Here in the United States, think about a company like Amazon. Most of their decisions are made here. We have Wall Street. We have the NASDAQ. We have massive corporations based and centered here in the United States. And so a lot of the world's economy revolves about what's going on in here in the United States. And our economy itself in the United States is based a lot on corporations and what happens within corporations versus, say, Zimbabwe, where they're going to be less influenced by what happens in the United States and more so what happens in the local markets. So anything I have highlighted or bolded is probably a term that's going to be in the field journal that you want to have a base understanding of. But primary or extractive activities. So this is going to be, once again, more so very early stage 2. So if we're thinking about stage 1, economy or country or area, they're going to be a very hunter-gathering society. And we don't, aside from tribes found within different parts of the world, no real country in the world has an economy based on hunting and gathering. Now, there are countries out there that are solely dependent on agriculture for their main source of economic revenue, and they don't necessarily export their items to the rest of the world. But primary economies, or you're going to think about countries that are still very much developing, that really don't have a lot of infrastructure. They have a lot more rural population versus urban. So if you think, like I said, a country like Kenya, Zimbabwe, Paraguay, what are some other examples out there, like Kazakhstan, Mongolia? Those are countries that are heavily dependent on the land use, agriculture, versus anything else in the country. Very little professional services found in those areas. So here is Myanmar. And we have an economy in Myanmar that's heavily dependent on extraction, where we're using the resources within the confines of our territory to support our livelihood, our economy. Because they're going to be taking these resources here, these logs, and selling them around the world. But what happens when they run out of timber? Are they going to be able to have a strong economy? No, they're going to lose jobs. Think about a country like Saudi Arabia. Where does Saudi Arabia get most of its income, its money? Oil. Yeah, oil. They're an extraction economy, though they're kind of bordering between into a secondary. They're trying to turn into a secondary economy because they realize, guess what? Oil is going to run out at some point. Some argue as early as 40 years from now, or it could be hundreds of years from now. It really depends on how much we consume and how much oil we end up finding down the line. But when we think of an extraction economy, an economy that's solely based on the resources found within the confines of that in that country. So other parts of the world where like fishing is the primary foundation of the economy. Fishing is the primary part of economies in Southeast Asia, Polynesia, and that's why many of those countries found in that region of the world are primarily primary economies. Okay, so all right. So let's, we visited this image a lot in class. So we have Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Based off of this image, which of these countries is more of a primary extraction country? Okay, so show of hands, who here thinks it's Haiti? Okay, who here thinks it's the Dominican Republic? Who here has no opinion? Why don't we have an opinion? Or are you undecided yet? So yeah, so you guys are right. It's Haiti. Why is it Haiti? Well, hold on. Move somebody towards the front of the room. Why is it Haiti? Yeah, sure.
Because there's been vaccine, right? And so I don't know.
Yeah, so just the visualization right there. If you look at Haiti on the left, it's a lot more brown, dry, arid. Even though they're on the same island, these aren't 100% completely different biomes. They're the same biome. They're tropical rainforest biome. But Haiti, their economy is a lot more heavily dependent on extracting timber, lumber, and cutting up that lumber and shipping it around the world. That's the primary use of their economy. Versus in the Dominican Republic, where yes, they still have lumber and timber industry, it's just not as important for the economy. They have other components of the economy, and they recognize, well, we're not so dependent on lumber that we destroy our environment. Rather, we can actually focus on other parts of the economy for our revenue. Okay, so based on the satellite image of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, how can you tell Haiti has a primary economy? So we just talked about this, so I want to hear from you guys. So let's make sure, let's get that 100% participation. Because these nearpods count towards your portfolio grade. Give you guys another minute here. Based on how I assume that okay, so got a couple more out here. Not us. I'll give you 20 more seconds. So while we're doing that, we'll look through some of these responses here. Yeah, so think overall these responses are great. You guys are recognizing that Haiti on the left, a lot more bleak. Obviously, resources being used a lot more than Dominican Republic, and that gives us evidence to tell us that Haiti is more of a primary economy than, say, the Dominican Republic. Okay. So then we have secondary economies. Secondary economic activity can include where you're still you're still extracting raw materials from your land, from your area, but you're starting to process those things into items. So maybe you extract iron and in your country, in your region, but then you have a smelter, you have a factory that is turning that iron into steel, and then you're selling that steel. So you're not solely dependent on just the resource itself. You still have to have that secondary chain, that secondary, process, that second link there in the chain. So then process the steel, and then they might go sell it to another country that has the manufacturing ability to turn that steel into, chain link fence or something like that. Now, historically speaking, there have been periods of secondary economic activity where we talk about the Stone Age, Copper Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. Those are all examples in world history of secondary economies found in like major world empires. So like whether it be the Romans or the Greeks. Some empires found in Africa, South America. But nowadays we use secondary economies to look at countries primarily in sub-Saharan Africa, because they're still kind of stuck in that stage where they still have to export that material out to, let's make sure we're staying awake. You got your notes up? Taking notes? Yeah. Okay. Remember, part of your field journal. I want to make sure you have yours. Notes up with it. I'm getting the field journal next week. Yeah, but the notes are. Yeah, just start a Google Doc. Okay. So that's what secondary economies look like. Then we get tertiary economies. So these are activities that provide essential services in a complex society. So now we're talking about those who are in the late stage of stage 3, the demographic transition model, early stage 4. These are countries where they have doctors, lawyers, teachers, stores, banks, things that are more complex in the society. So it's not to say that a country like Zimbabwe doesn't have those things there, but their economy is not dependent on it. If you think about here in the United States, these are all common careers. These are all important jobs that a lot of Americans have. And that if we didn't have the need for doctors, the need for lawyers or teachers, then our economy would collapse. Versus like a country like Zimbabwe, where yes, doctors are important, but if all of a sudden lawyers disappeared out of Zimbabwe, their economy would collapse. If that makes sense. Or if they got rid of banks in Zimbabwe. So that's where we're getting into the United States. China is more and more turning into a tertiary economy. Then we get into the quaternary and quinary forms of economics. These are going to be more and more. The United States is more and more in these categories too. Very few countries, mostly in Europe, Western Europe, we're going to get that category. Where this is where you have major corporations like Amazon, like Microsoft, that are headquartered in the country, and they have far-reaching implications around the world. and that they employ thousands and thousands of individuals. In a country like Zimbabwe, company like Amazon isn't really that important to the Zimbabwean economy, but it is for the United States. So what would be an example of, what would be another example of one of these economies?
Capitalism.
Huh?
Capitalism.
Well, like, no, a country example.
Oh, America.
Russia? Okay, so where do you think Russia stands? So I think tertiary for sure. But do you think Russia's at this level yet, ordinary, generic? Kind of. You know, Russia developed its own COVID-19 vaccine. You guys know how effective it was? 55% effective, compared to like the Pfizer vaccines with 96% effective. So could you say that they have their own research, they have their own universities, Russia? So you could make an argument if, you know, say on the AP test, they ask an FRQ for you to describe or like list out 3 examples of quaternary or quinary economies. You could make the argumentation, you could make the argument for Russia. But you'd have to really pull out, oh, well, you know, they have some prestigious universities in Russia that conduct research and like they develop their own COVID-19 vaccine, but it's not that effective. The research coming out of Russia is not as effective as compared to a country like the United Kingdom or the United States. Okay, so we just need to have a broad understanding of the different types of economy. That's going to help us understand how agriculture comes into play into all these categories of the economy. So simply put, agriculture itself is purposeful tending of crops and raising of livestock in order to produce food, fiber. So many of you guys got this definition right when I asked at the beginning of the nearby. That essentially, how are humans using the land around them in order to produce food and materials to keep us going as a society? We've talked a lot about how humans interact with their environment around them. You know, with culture, we talked about, you know, how humans modify the environment around them in order to add to their culture, or how culture is affected by the environment around them. Now we're talking about how humans use the land around them to benefit, you know, their existence, whether that be keeping a strong economy, a livelihood, or simply staying alive. So did everybody get the definition of agriculture? Okay. Persistence of agriculture. So think about here in the United States, we have about 2 million farmers. Now that sounds like a lot just off the bat. Well, what's our country's population roughly? Well, no, in the US. Yeah.
300 million.
300, between 300, 330. Probably a little higher now. We'll see what the census says. Now, if you do that percentage, who's our math people here? Would that be 2 million out of 320 million?
Less than 1%.
Yeah. So what's the problem there? Do we have enough farmers? Well, who are things we don't have enough farmers? Who are things we have just the right amount? 220. Is that our population? Yeah, so we're talking, you know, less than 1% of our population. Now, once again, that gives us evidence that we're not a primary economy at all, because our agriculture is an important component of our economy, but it's not the biggest factor. Now, going back to whether we have a farming shortage, well, how does technology come into play with agriculture? Do we actually need more labor? Or what do we have on here? Farm equipment. What? Yeah, so,
Because it could help clinic, down the top.
right, right. Nowadays, one person or one small family can easily run a big commercial farm. Because there's so much technology out there that makes it so that things that required a lot of humans in the past to do this type of work, we now have a tractor to do, we have this piece of technology to do it. Now, what does that mean though? Does it mean that that job goes away in the farm?
Still a lot of labor, it's just easier online.
Yeah,
Or you gotta do it online.
yeah, so it's easier to do, but that job translates to factory. Because who's gonna make the tractors? Who's gonna make the stuff? The factory workers. And so that's what we saw, what happened in the United States after the Dust Bowl and after World War II. We saw, and we're going to talk about agricultural revolutions and increase in technology, but we saw overall technology went up and the need for farm hands go down. That's why we saw our average family size go down dramatically. Why did it make sense to have 8 kids back in 1930? Free labor. Y'all, if you guys were 1930 working out on a farm, Brigham City, you guys wouldn't be going to school. You guys would be way past done with school, maybe 5th grade. Because guess what? You guys going out to the farm, you're gonna work 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
And you're not getting paid. You know what your payment is? Dinner. Your payment is dinner. Okay? And you're going to be working in those fields until your parents get old and can't work them anymore, and then you take over the farm, do the duties. Yeah.
Hey, my dad had to drop out of school in 6th grade in Texas so that he could work on his dad's farm. It was an expectation. For that, he wrote a horse in school every day. That's how much life's changed.
Yeah, and it's only a few generations removed in terms of this massive change, and it was truly a revolution. Where we became less dependent on farm hands and now more dependent on technology. And me growing up in Iowa, I know my grandparents, my grandpa got in trouble because he went to college instead of staying and working on the farm. His parents disowned him because he was supposed to take over the farm. But he said, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I actually wanted, he ended up working for a radio communications company. Okay, so for us to understand kind of agriculture and how different regions use their land, we have to think back to Unit 1 where we looked at biomes and just kind of how the world's set up in terms of climate. So just kind of a refresher here. Primarily, what latitudes, remember latitude, north and south? What latitude do we typically see more farming land or arable land? Okay, so the Midwest in the United States. So we're thinking right here, North America. What latitudes are those around? It'll probably be easier to see under. So about 40 to about 50s, depending on the season and where you are. Like right now, you gonna be growing anything up here? No, because it's like. By the way, it was the wind chill in Iowa was 40 below this morning. A lot of friends, they actually canceled the school district that I went up to. They canceled school because it was so cold because the buses, the gas for. Yeah. Well, yeah. So we're gonna look at how crops change according to the different latitudes. Because up here, the crops are gonna look a lot different than down in southeastern U.S. What's grown in the south? Think back to your U.S. history, 8th grade. Cotton. Cotton, tobacco, those are big crops down there because that's what can easily grow there almost year round. And the soil is better suited for those versus in the Midwest and Iowa, what do they grow? Corn, soybeans, into some wheat country out in Kansas. Yeah, so you see this pattern though. follow those lines around 40 degrees and to the north, most of Europe into Siberia, northern China. So if we look at these countries, and if we compare this map to countries with high, with their economy, with a high amount of agriculture, we're going to see a pattern comes here. We don't see a lot of that in Libya or Egypt. Because what's in Egypt and Libya? Yeah, the Saharan Desert. So this is a great reminder of kind of where we're at in climate zones and where things are going to grow better or worse. So yeah, so this is where agriculture becomes a primary component of the economy. So where do we see a pattern? So everything in green is where they have most of the success with producing agriculture, especially crops. And we kind of see that pattern again along the 40th and 50th parallels. Yeah. So we definitely see that pattern emerge where we see more agriculture along those lines of latitude versus, say, you see in North Africa, in the Saharan Desert, a lot more nomadic forms of agriculture and herding, which we'll cover later on next week. So if we think about wheat, how many of you guys would disagree that wheat isn't a part of like a world staple? Like wheat is a foundation of our diet. Wheat goes into a lot.
Bread and sauce.
Yeah. Does anybody either currently or they know somebody who like know and have gluten free breads or whatever? Yeah, gluten free. Gluten free. So you don't realize how much wheat is used in our day-to-day life until you encounter either a loved one or yourself have to now eat gluten free. Gluten is one of the components within wheat. And anything that contains wheat, you have to have gluten free, you can't eat. And so, like, even the things you would never think of have wheat. Like there are some, like string cheese, some string cheese brands have wheat to like help keep the cheese bonded together. But once again, we see this pattern here because we're talking about kind of regions of the world that are producing the most wheat. Once again, we see a lot in Europe, a lot in the Midwest US up here, and then we see a lot here. Now, what does this also tell us in terms of climate? So we know there's climate zones over here. What about elevation and like seasonal temperatures? We see a lot of wheat in also warmer, like these areas in the winter, do they get warm or cold? Well, in the winter, in the winter. So like up here, right now, they're not growing wheat. So does this tell us that wheat is a year-long crop? No, it's seasonal. They're gonna start planting this here in a couple months when things start warming up. Like what's up here? So what's directly north of you? What mountain? Well, Everest is part of the Himalayas. The Himalayan mountains. And right down here, we have the Indus, the Ganges rivers. And the elevation's a lot higher up here, so it actually does get kind of cold in the winter up here. Versus like down in southern tip of India, where it's 80, 90 degrees year round. Same goes down here. We have mountains and high plains, this part of South America. And so wheat's going to be more appropriate to grow here. If I'm a wheat farmer, am I going to move to Nigeria? No. If I'm a wheat farmer, am I going to move to Malaysia?
And also have to go along with like if you're gonna go have enough rain, like snow and the winters, take all the melted snow and use it.
Okay, yeah, so irrigation does play a massive role because theoretically, we could like, if you find some of these areas here, like out here in Utah. If we had the right irrigation, the right amount of water out here, we could probably easily grow wheat. Because we're at the same latitude in Salt Lake than we are like in Iowa and Kansas. Yeah.
So I would want them to go on a diet and then like find rice that they down very little amount. So they want to chop it. And
Yeah, no, like I said,
it's hard.
yeah, going on to a gluten-free diet is very, very challenging. But for some, yeah, it can be a diet experience to cut out gluten into your day-to-day diet. But for others, it's actually prevent pain, medical condition. Okay, so let's think about the United States. So we saw the big picture, but where do we have most of the United States being devoted to farming?
Big old.
Yeah, right there, the flyover states, as we like to call them. So we get Iowa, my home state here, but we get Nebraska, the Dakotas, we get Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. And then what happens as you head farther west? So what's the big problem right here? What's right here? There's a mountain range. We're on the western edge of it. It's not the Wasatch. The Wasatch is just a branch. Rockies. Kind of hard to grow crops on the mountains. Yeah. So this is Iron County, actually. So this is Iron. So Box Elders here, Cache County. There's Tooele, Salt Lake County. This is what's the county just south of Daggett County. Yeah, I can't remember. But now, does this necessarily mean that there's crops being grown here? Okay, well, this is not as big of farms or production, but what's Utah kind of known for in terms of agriculture? Cattle. And so the land out here, like in Wyoming, parts of Colorado, Arizona, we see a little bit more shaded green, not necessarily because there's crops being grown there, but that's where cattle. Yeah. So yeah, so we have primarily the Midwest. That's why they kind of consider Ohio part of the Midwest. I don't think Ohio part of the Midwest. But then we have anybody know what's here? That is so it's about Sacramento. Yeah, Sacramento Valley. It's like out of all the desert aridness around here, Sacramento Valley is just like really low-lying valley, a lot of agricultural boom to the California economy. Okay, corn. Okay. So corn is a massive. Well, do we think is corn important for like our diet here?
No.
Oh, corn starch, so like the soda you drink. It's all coming from corn starch. But what is this corn going towards? So we're not eating it. Cows and pigs. So the big reason why corn is so synonymous with like Iowa and Nebraska, because there's a lot of pigs being raised there. Yeah. Livestock. Yeah, no, man, that's the thing is like you can tell, cause like in Iowa, like you get fresh sweet corn. Sweet corn will be, but we wouldn't eat sweet corn to the cattle or pigs. And so like you're gonna get a lot more feed corn being grown in Nebraska. That's where a lot of more feed corn. A lot of the corn that we consume is gonna be eastern Iowa because the climate's better suited. Okay, so let's look at some other components of agriculture in the United States. So here's our winter wheat. production. This means wheat that is being harvested towards beginning of winter. So it's planted in the summer, grows for the season. And as you can see, where's our biggest wheat producer? Kansas. Maybe some of the Kansas City Chiefs players could become farmers. So wheat primarily it's still in the Midwest, but what does this tell us about the environment, the climate?
They stay in the warm.
Okay, so southwestern Kansas, part of the Oklahoma Panhandle and Texas Panhandle, those are going to be warmer on average. They're going to have they're going to stay in the 50s and 60s all the way until towards the end of November. So it's still ideal. They don't really have the first real frost until end of October, versus like in Iowa where the first frost happens beginning of October. You basically get an extra month of growth. What about cotton?
Southern.
South. Because the climate is a lot better suited, and the soil is a lot more suited for cotton. And there's a lot more moisture in, at least in the southeast. What's happening though in the southwest? Irrigation. A lot more. Though that cotton is being produced, it takes up a lot of water, and it's come from the Colorado River, and the Colorado River is running dry. Did we talk about the Colorado River, Unit 1? Okay, so that's something we'll cover about how dry the Colorado River is getting because of agriculture.
Wasn't there like a big deal about like Nevada trying to take water from the Colorado River to the
Well, yeah, we have a lot of water wars, a lot of states, including Utah, fighting over. Because what happened was we sold our water shares to California when California was growing, because we get a certain amount of water from the Colorado River, and then California just boomed and they used up all their water. And guess who else was booming? Us in southern Utah, St. George. And so now we don't have those shares anymore because we sold them to California. So there's a lot of lawsuits and legalities going on with that. So here's soybeans. Soybeans go into a lot of our food today, are a major component. So soybeans are a lot more important to our agriculture than, or to our day-to-day life than corn is necessarily. Okay. Couple more to get through. Here's a fun one. 1 dot equals 10,000 cattle. So where's our biggest concentration, do you think? Texas Panhandle, southwestern Kansas, up until western Nebraska, eastern parts of Nebraska, the Dakotas. A lot of cattle happening in that part of the Midwest, primarily because it's more arid. There's larger land, flatter land for cattle to graze, versus out east where it's hillier and harder to raise cattle. Just like here in Utah, we have a higher proportion of cattle raising because we have a lot of flat open range out there. Especially if you guys get to southern Utah, if you go down to like Iron County, Cedar City, you're gonna see that a lot. Okay, here's pigs. I always remember this meme. It's just like there are more pigs in the United States than there are people in the world. There's over 7 billion pigs in the United States. So the same, the pigs have an uprising. Anyway, so yeah, Iowa, Minnesota, big pig producing county or states, but we also have some interest in Utah. We won't necessarily go into the explanation with those just yet. Yes. Okay, so what happened before farming? So we're going to take a little history lesson. We're going to focus on this more next week because I want to make sure we have time to watch the quick video I want to show you guys. But anyway, so what we're going to focus on next week is we're going to talk about historic agricultural trends. What happened before worlds or countries became countries? You know, how did people live? Basically, you'd have your own farm, and that would produce the food for yourself, and you didn't really trade or sell to anybody. So we're going to kind of look at some of the historic trends in agriculture next week. Okay. All right. I know it's a lot of information, to take in. I was talking a lot. I was also a little nervous because you see my boss, Principal McDaniel, was here. I do thank you guys for being alert. For the most part, doing near pods. You guys want to watch a funny video? Okay. So, real quick, let me. We'll stop here. So what I've started doing